We can do all things together through Jesus.
Hello, family. Today we're going to be talking about how, with the Lord's help and the help of friends, I can use my anger well. And I really like the way that Steve phrased this title, because we're not just focusing on controlling our anger or dealing with our anger, but talking about how we can use this gift from God, and I believe anger is a gift from God, in a wise way, in a way that actually blesses the lives of others. You see, anger is definitely a characteristic of the nature of God. When you, for instance, look at the ministry of Jesus, you see several examples of him being very angry. John chapter 2, when he cleanses the temple, there's no question but what he is angry at what he sees as the desecration of this place of worship. In Mark chapter 3, when Jesus heals this man with an infirm hand, the Pharisees are all upset about him doing that on the Sabbath and all. And the scripture specifically says this makes Jesus angry. Angry that these guys are more upset about him breaking Sabbath than they are happy about the fact that this man has been healed. Matthew chapter 23, when Jesus tears into the scribes and the Pharisees, calling them hypocrites, he is angry because they have taken the law that God gave to the Jews to bless them, and they've turned it into a curse. They've made it a burden instead of a blessing. And so repeatedly you can see that God gets angry. It's a divine attribute. And if we're created in the image of God, then he has given us the capacity to get angry as well. It's interesting, there's I believe a correlation between how we react in fear and how we react in anger. If something startles me, something frightens me, my heart rate picks up, the adrenaline pumps, hormones flow, and I'm immediately prepared to either defend myself or flee or whatever it takes. In the same way, when something angers me, the adrenaline starts pumping, the pulse goes up, hormones start flowing. There's a similar physiological reaction. Now, it's functioning in two entirely different ways. Fear is preparing me to defend myself or flee, and anger is actually preparing me to be aggressive if I need to be. And I think that's where the challenge comes in. As Paul will say in the book of Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 26, in your anger, do not sin. Now, why the warning? Because when we get angry, we use the phrase, we lose our temper. Well, actually, that's kind of a misnomer. You don't lose your temper. You know exactly where your temper is. What we lose is our self-control. What we lose is our willingness or our ability to watch what we say and watch what we do. And we end up saying things and doing things that cause us to regret later on. A couple of helpful hints about this real quick that have been shared with me and I really appreciate. One is a writer several years ago suggested what he called a 30-second rule, and I think it makes a lot of sense. When something triggers you and you get angry, before you respond, give yourself 30 seconds. Think about it. You know, somebody angers you on Facebook or Twitter or in an email, and you sit down and you hammer out a response, or somebody says something and give yourself 30 seconds. Isn't a very long time, but it's amazing how if you'll stop and think about how you ought to respond in a given situation, how often you'll go, you know what, I'm not going to hit send, I'm not going to send this, I'm not going to say this. And we can save ourselves from a lot of embarrassment and misery and causing a lot of problems. The other principle is rooted in Scripture, Ephesians 4 verse 27, where the Apostle Paul will say, do not let the sun go down on your wrath. The last thing we need to do is hold on to nurse our anger, because it's real easy for that to turn into bitterness. And if that happens, then we're heading down a road that's not healthy spiritually, a road we don't need to go down. I think it's important when we talk about using our anger well that we ask ourselves, what makes you angry? What lights your fuse? Somebody cuts you off in traffic, somebody speaks disrespectfully to you, that kind of thing. Very often what makes us angry is something that we take as a personal affront. When you look at what made Jesus angry, it wasn't personal affronts. What made Jesus angry was when he saw other people being hurt, when he saw other people being abused, taken advantage of. And I think that's what needs to stoke our anger as well. I saw just today that I believe the city of Minneapolis is going to have a day in which they're going to honor abortion providers. That makes me angry. It really does. I mean, is our culture so sick that we're going to honor people that kill babies? Really? The last few weeks, I've talked about how we see corporations in this country that very cold-heartedly set out to addict our children, addict them to alcohol, addict them to tobacco, addict them to marijuana, because they know that if they can addict them as teenagers, they're going to have them as customers for years until their lives come to an end, and they could make tens of thousands of dollars off of them. This is cold and cruel and mean and makes me angry. And I think that kind of thing ought to make all of us angry. And I think that's exactly the kind of anger that God approves of. That is, I believe, using our anger well when that anger motivates us to speak out against abuses like that. There are things that should make us angry and should motivate us to action because they're just wrong. And so may God help us to be angry about the right things in the right way. This is certainly worthy of discussion, and I hope you have a very fruitful discussion about this important subject today. God bless. Thank you.
We can do all things together.